Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We begin with our top story. Pro-Russian activists in eastern Ukraine have declared Donetsk a sovereign republic and have asked the Russian President Vladimir Putin to send in peacekeepers. The rebels have called for a referendum on secession from Ukraine by the 11th of May. To hear more about it, we're joined in studio by the Russia Today Middle East Bureau Chief, Paula Slyer. Good morning, Paula.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a look at this next report to recap last week's events, and we'll chat.
More than 500 kilometers separate Crimea from the city of Donetsk. But today the distance seems shorter than ever as Russian supporters stormed the regional government building in the city and declared Donetsk a republic.
We are addressing you, Vladimir Putin, as our last hope for our future and for the future of our children. Only in Russia we see our last remaining defender of our culture, of the Russian world. Only a peacekeeping force of the Russian army will be able to send a convincing message to the Kiev militias which came to power by the means of weapons and blood.
Donetsk, located in the eastern district of Ukraine, is considered a pro-Russian stronghold. Over the last few weeks, Russian forces approached the city after taking over the Crimean Peninsula. Now, following the annexation of Crimea, Ukrainians are worried about a further escalation in the region.
Dear citizens of Ukraine, yesterday the second wave of the Russian Federation's special operations against Ukraine started. The goal is to destabilize the situation in the country, topple Ukrainian authorities, disrupt the elections, and to tear our country apart.
Despite the sanctions and the international outrage, Moscow is not giving up. Russian President Vladimir Putin added more fuel to the fire today, comparing Ukrainian non-government organizations to some of the worst regimes of mankind.
We will never allow NGOs to be used for destructive purposes as it has happened in Ukraine, where they're mainly NGOs used to finance nationalistic Nazi structures and armed gangs, which have become the main force behind the anti-constitutional coup.
Now, with Donetsk about to fall into the Russian hands, many are concerned that this snowball may roll all the way to Kiev.
So, Paula, we'll get to Donetsk in a second, but there's also more of a bigger war going on, a war of words between the West and Russia. Sergei Lavrov just wrote in The Guardian yesterday almost an op-ed accusing the West of groundless whipping up of tension. So it's more of a macro kind of a rhetoric, war of words than what's actually happening on the ground.
I think it's both, as you say. They're certainly happening parallel to each other. Nothing new coming out on the rhetoric side from either the Russian side or the European side. I mean, it's been going on for several months now, particularly related to Ukraine. I think what we see happening right now is something that people predicted was going to happen. I know I've sat here with you in the studio and we asked ourselves, now Crimea, is Donetsk going to be next? So certainly what is unfolding was expected, and the big question, of course, is just what it's going to lead to and how much of eastern Ukraine is ultimately going to follow the route of Crimea, if indeed it does. But on the issue of war of words, I mean, the latest statement coming out of the Russian Foreign Ministry is stop blaming us. I mean, Russia continues to say you have this, what they call an illegal government in Kiev. They call it a coup, and they say that there's the right-wing elements that need to be monitored, that need to be watched. You have the West that is accusing Russia of stirring up tensions on the pretext that if the situation in Donetsk and other eastern Ukrainian regions becomes more unstable, they argue that the Russians then will have a pretext for taking over eastern Ukraine. So the rhetoric is to be expected.
And they're also arguing that the Russians are operating according to a pre-written script, that there's this big master plan to continue and take over, as they say, parts of Ukraine. Donetsk is not even in the same region as Crimea, meaning there is kind of, one will say, you know, this is not a regional thing, this is actually a national thing going over the entire country.
Certainly, that is the accusation that is coming from Europe. I mean, the Russian position has been clear. The Russian President Vladimir Putin, a few weeks ago, when the whole Crimea incident happened, said that Crimea was a very different situation to Donetsk and eastern Ukraine. And there are charges being leveled at him that there is now going to be the Russians taking over, which is how the Europeans put it, eastern Ukraine. And the Russian president said that he supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine. He has no intention of doing anything there. What he really was doing in Crimea was observers responding to the people's call for help. What you have in Donetsk is a different situation to Crimea. You have the majority who are Russian-speaking, but the figure hovers at around 48 to 49%. In Crimea, it was a much larger percentage.
Right.
You also have in Donetsk pro-Russians who are divided amongst themselves. There are those who want to be part of Russia. There are those who want to be a federation. There are those who actually want to remain part of Ukraine and want the former president who was supported by Russia, Viktor Yanukovych, to return. And then you even have those in Donetsk who are very worried that if they join with Russia, it could trigger anti-Russian feelings elsewhere in Ukraine. So it's not exactly the same situation. So when people talk about Donetsk leading the way, it's still a very big question mark what is going to happen there.
But we're still hearing reports of tens of thousands of Russian troops on the border, meaning is Russia preparing for something that the West is threatening that they know, or do we not know enough?
Well, these claims of all these Russian troops on the borders is something that has been leveled for several weeks now. Russia's position is that it does not have more troops on the border than it is allowed to have, that number of troops is still very much within what it's allowed to have on the border. And there were about 2 weeks ago foreign observers who actually went to the border, and Russia has invited foreign observers to come and see what the Russian troops are doing there. And those observers said at the time, again, that there was nothing untoward going on there. So it's not, and again, I'm presenting the Russian point of view, it's not from their point of view that they are preparing anything. Of course, they're concerned about what the intentions are from the Europeans. Of course, the Europeans are worried about the intentions of the Russians. But a lot is being made about these Russian troops on the border, and the reality is that they are in the border, even in Crimea when I was there, and a lot of the Western media was talking about Russian troops taking over Crimea. It wasn't the reality that I saw on the ground. You certainly had Russian soldiers eventually that did move into the military bases, but you would read the Western media and they would say that there were these shootouts. I wouldn't see the shootouts, and you would read the Russian media and there weren't shootouts. So back perhaps to your first question, there's this whole war of words, but there's certainly a media war as well, because there's very different stories that emerge from the Western versus the Russian media.
And we're also hearing about retrooping in Ukraine, and Ukraine is also getting its military in, I would say, trying to get it in line with Russia at least. But the economic situation in Ukraine is a dwindling one. It's one that's not going to allow for a strong Ukraine against a very strong Russia.
I mean, it's a very important point to make, this whole question of the economy. Let me remind you that eastern Ukraine is the industrial heartland. So when we talk about regions like Donetsk, this is where you have your coal mines, where you have your oil industry, your gas industry, your factories. And you also have a very different population there to other parts. When I was in Donetsk, and I have spent some time there, and you meet these coal miners, they are very aggressive, and their leaders now are calling. They've already taken over governmental buildings. Their leaders are calling for a continuation in the fight. It presents the Kiev government with a very difficult dilemma. Do you respond to those kind of calls with threats, because violence begets violence, or do you just step back, which is what some of the leaders in Ukraine are doing now? You have presidential elections coming up, and some of them are saying, you know what, we've already lost the East.
Right.
Let's just acknowledge that and focus on the West. Some of them are even using what's happening in the East in their election campaigning. So it's going to be very interesting to monitor and look at how, again, what the Russians call this illegal leadership are actually going to respond to these demands being put forward by this Russian population, or this pro-Russian population in the east of the country.
And in the beginning of May 11th, we're going to have a referendum, a so-called referendum in Donetsk. As you said, it's a very divided area, as was Crimea, but it's even more so divided. It is pro-Russian in some parts. It's Russian-speaking, but it's, as you said, a lot pro-Yanukovych and pro-other parts of Ukraine. Is it going to be, you know, the minority overrules the majority, or do you think maybe that the trends will change until then?
It's very difficult to say. I can tell you what the mood is like on Donetsk at the moment. There is Lenin Square, and every day you have crowds gathering there. Already 2 weeks ago, people were going there daily and writing their names down on a petition calling for this referendum. So this idea of a referendum is nothing new. They say that they're going to have it by May the 11th. Certainly, you're going to have the majority. Again, we're talking 48, 49% that are going to vote for some kind of annexation with Russia. How that's going to materialize and how Russia responds still remains to be seen. You also have Russian Facebook, where you have more than 10,000 people who support Donetsk actually becoming part of Russia. And those numbers continue to grow. A question also is going to be, let's say they have this referendum and they vote yes. What is the response going to be like from Kiev? Are they going to call in the police? Are they going to call in the security forces? Or are they even going to call in the army?
Right. Or the West.
Or the West. Right. And what is going to be the response from the West? The latest response from the West is not only particular alarm, but they have said again that they don't intend to make Ukraine part of NATO. So the West still struggles with that question. How do you support? It's all very well to say in words that you support, but what does that support translate to on the ground if Ukraine is not a member of NATO? And you can't just sit back and say, well, we support you, but we're not actually going to do anything.
Indeed. Paula Slyer, Middle East Bureau Chief for Russia Today, thank you for joining us this morning. And we move on to our next topic of today. After weeks of searching vast areas of ocean, investigators now have what they call their most promising lead yet in efforts to find the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. A Pinger locator in the Indian Ocean has detected signals consistent with those sent by a flight data recorder and by a cockpit voice recorder. To hear more about this extremely mysterious saga, we're joined in studio by the Israel Hayom aviation correspondent, Aaron Lapidot. Good morning, Aaron. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take a look at the next report and then chat.
The multinational effort to find the missing Malaysian Airlines plane continues. On Monday, Malaysian officials updated that an Australian vessel detected two signals which are consistent with the plane's black box transmissions.
The new developments over the last few hours has been the most promising lead we have had. I urge all Malaysians and the international community to unite in their prayers and not give up hope. We will continue with all our efforts to find MH370.
However, not everyone were quick to cite those signals as a positive development. A U.S. Navy captain was careful in his observations.
An emotional up and down. We'd like to be able to tell the families that we found the location, but until we can reconfirm, we should not be too optimistic. We should be very measured, as Air Chief Marshal Houston was commenting. Because the worst thing we want to do is put the families through, the emotional turmoil of possible but maybe false detections.
Even if this is the most promising lead so far, one thing is certain. All 239 passengers' lives are lost, and the mystery of flight MH370 will haunt the field of aviation for many years to come.
So, Aaron, what are the odds that the signals that we're hearing, that the Australian ships are hearing, are actually from that same black box?
Well, as they said, it's the most promising lead they
or maybe
they
the
have.
only lead. That's the question.
Well, actually there is something to be noticed here, and that is the first time that they have the signals that were deciphered from the satellite, from the Inmarsat satellite, and the pings from the bottom of the sea, and they are in the same neighborhood, let's say. It's in the same area. It's a very vast area. It's not like a very small patch of sea. Well, something like that, yeah. But still, they are in the same region. Now, if you consider that this region is opposite to the initial course of the airplane, the route was from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, and this is 180 degrees on the other side and hundreds and maybe thousands of miles away from that, this is something that is significant. It was sort of confirmation that the signals that the Inmarsat received were not lost or were not something that had no substantiation. But still, the problem is that they were getting these signals twice with the ship, with the Ocean Shield we just saw on the clip, but they couldn't sort of make a decisive point, exact location. That was the problem.
And the biggest problem now is that although they have found this great promising lead, there's batteries on this device, and batteries are, they're doomed to run out.
Aren't they ever?
Yeah.
I mean, you always lose your batteries when you need them most.
Exactly.
That's the problem. Yes, we are on the 31st day of after the missing, after the disappearance of the plane, and these batteries are supposed to work about 30 days. But they are not the only means of search. Of course, this is the best because you have an emission of transmission. You get to the point, you're quite sure that this is it. But they have also a device, a submersible, which is called bluefin, which it's a sort of sonar. And this sonar can go as deep as 4.5 kilometers, which is the seabed at that place. And they can look. It's a radar. It's an underwater radar. That's
Meaning
the idea.
instead of searching from the air, they're going to start searching from within the sea, which is, as we said, the size of Britain.
Yes.
Not a lot of hope put on the bluefin.
Well, if everything, if you put them together, it sort of brings you somewhere. But yes, it's the hope is dwindling. I'm afraid to say, because once the batteries die, the search is much more difficult.
Indeed. And then the people, of course, that are suffering the most right now are, of course, the families of the victims of the MH370. Ron Lapidot, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
And coming up next, India kicks off the world's biggest elections in the country's remote northeast. But first, we're going to go back to hear some more of this morning's headlines. And welcome back to I-24 News. I'm here with Arad Nir, the Channel 2 Senior Foreign Affairs Editor. And I get also to say hello and good morning to our one and only Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you may have missed while scanning the headlines. Got over your jet lag, I hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Yesterday you were a bit sleepy, so I hope...
know, and a little Tel Aviv cafe
there
helped to, take me over that hump.
Yeah, so you're back in the Middle East, no more US of A.
No, but speaking of food, I mentioned coffee. Do you like breakfast?
I love it. That's the best Israeli breakfast. That's why we come and live in Tel Aviv.
I love breakfast, but this headline is a little unsettling from the Times of Israel. Food insecurity affects 900,000 Israelis, report finds, and that includes breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a lot of Israelis who are going for as much as a full day without really having a full meal because of tight financial times.
Indeed. These are the same reports that come out almost every holiday, either Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, or on Pesach, the Passover, the holiday that is just coming up. And the numbers keep on growing every year.
Right. And so that's something to watch. Again, it's in the holiday period and after, so of concern, and there's no real concrete solution.
It's really like the weather in this country.
Meaning
Everybody is talking about it,
and no one's doing much about it.
Well, security trumps everything, so that's why food insecurity will continue, of course, to be a problem, unfortunately.
Speaking of security, that brings me to the second headline of great interest from The Guardian. Tony Blair gave an interview in Britain yesterday, and he says that, referring to Syria, that a failure to intervene will have terrible consequences.
Now he says it?
Now he says it. Of course, he's defended at the same breath his decision to remove, or co-decision to remove Saddam Hussein from power in 2003. He doesn't really explain how he would intervene.
He makes that parallel between the Iraqi intervention?
He defends these sort of tough choices. So,
well, that was a choice that had Britain up in arms and people out in the streets, and still it's something that's a very sore spot on the UK public.
It is, yeah. People confront him in public over Iraq.
Absolutely,
still.
The problem in Syria is that there are more unknown unknowns than any known unknowns. So the situation is very complicated there, and making a headline is the easiest part.
This is very true.
But to say it has terrible consequences now, when already there are terrible consequences, is beyond.
He's sort of like, get ready for more, without really specifying.
It's a headline, as Arad said.
Exactly.
It's a good headline, and that's about it.
Tony Blair knows how to stay in the news. Washington,
and stay in Israel.
Yeah. This headline is disturbing back in the United States. Washington Post says that tracing the U.S. heroin surge back south of the border as Mexican cannabis output falls. Basically, this article is saying that with the decriminalization of marijuana increasingly in the United States, one of the ripple effects that heroin use is on the upswing. And in Mexico, in one part of it...
Because they can't get marijuana?
Because basically heroin is now is replacing some of that market.
Wow.
And this Mexican province, Sierra Madre.
Completely different drug and a completely different...
And a very dangerous drug.
Extremely.
And addiction rates are rising in the United States, in rural areas actually, perhaps surprisingly. And this article shows how Mexico is implicated in this, basically converting some of their land to opium poppy growth, which is quite alarming for drug enforcement authorities of course, the American public that's at risk.
A whole new Breaking Bad episode just for that.
Yeah, a whole new series perhaps, one that we may not want to watch. But
no, that's horrible.
Also back in the U.S., the Wall Street Journal has a headline from the other day, which was quite interesting, about Navy drones having a mind of their own. There's a new $100 million 5-year program afoot in the U.S. Navy to basically using an app and a tablet for special Navy operators to direct helicopters, manned and unmanned, on their own. So this is actually quite a big development in the military tech field.
Until now, it wasn't in the Navy. It was only used in air troops.
No, apparently, there have been drones, but they're taking it to the next level with actual helicopters, which can have people in them, but being guided by the use of basically an app, a special app, and a tablet with only a half hour of training necessary to guide these helicopters to wherever they might have to go.
Yeah. Well, drones are the biggest issue, I think, of the past decade at least in Afghanistan.
Yeah, increasingly so. Yeah, as the military budget seems to be allowing for this kind of development. So that's interesting to see. And speaking of the Navy, the Muscat Daily in Oman reports that Oman has been holding a joint naval exercise with Iran, and this was it's actually continuing
They're going
through
against
today.
their Gulf brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and interestingly, the Pakistan and Iranian navies are holding a joint military exercise in the eastern part of the Strait of Hormuz tomorrow. So Iran is partnering in many ways with its neighbors.
Whichever who's willing to, right now.
Yeah, well, apparently more than a few. So not really sure what exercises they're performing there, but there is some kind of cooperation on that level.
They are exercising the charm attack.
The charm offensive
charm offensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to add submarines and frigates. Yeah.
I'm trying to get the United States. Pakistan is here and there friend of the United States, depending on the day that.
And of course, it shares quite a long border with Iran as well. So that's interesting to see. And how about seeing yourself 15 pounds lighter?
I bring it on.
You don't need it, but you really don't. I want to add 15 pounds, but this new app called Skinny Pics is causing a stir. Daily Beast reports this new app shaves 15 pounds off your selfies, and it's tearing up iTunes. Yeah, I know.
It's horrible.
It's either wonderful or
horrible. Did
Gwyneth
Paltrow make that one up?
I don't know. I'll have to check goop.com or her website.
After you eat for 30 days, one apple a day, sliced very thin.
Wait, isn't Apple her daughter's name?
It
her
is.
son's name.
But she recipes are thinly sliced apple and call it a carpaccio, things like
only from the mind of Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
But that app is quite controversial because does it send a bad message to teenage girls, and I don't know. But
in general, the selfie culture is sending horrible messages to some people. Get it completely out of proportion.
Yeah, it's
Ellen's selfie, which was retweeted a million times and was then known to be part of a commercial
right, as was
operation.
A recent selfie at the White House with the Boston Red Sox player, and it was actually Samsung may have been in the know on that. So all sorts of controversies with selfies continue. Kiss.
Yeah, okay. Some culture.
Yeah, the crazy band from, I guess it was the 70s and 80s. Well, I call them crazy. Well, apparently there's a new tell-all memoir. Paul Stanley was one of the Kiss front guys, has said that some of the band members were anti-Semitic.
Give me proof. Give me some, what did they say? What did they do?
He said that one of the guitarists had a collection of Nazi memorabilia.
Oh, that will do it for you.
Yeah, that might indicate that you have some anti-Semitic issues, maybe.
Wow.
Two of the band members, are Jewish. Paul Stanley was actually born Stanley Eisen.
Well, that explains
Gene
it.
Simmons.
Yeah, exactly. It's self-hate. They're allowed to have Nazi memorabilia.
It's headline generating, but that band scared a whole generation of Americans with that makeup.
They just want to get back on the headlines. And the New York Post. Remind yourself where the source is.
Yeah.
They know
but it's good reading.
The Jewish population in New York will love to.
Yeah. Do you know that Gene Simmons, his original name was Chaim Vitz? He's from Israel.
No, I did not
he made
know
it big with. Who knew? I mean,
nobody.
Is that true?
According to the New York Post, and I believe every word the New York Post says. I mean, as we all should.
There's a necessary disclaimer.
Necessary disclaimer, absolutely.
Gene Simmons is a bit more kissy than Chaim Weitz. So
yeah, it's a little bit more kiss your face or
indeed.
something like that. I don't know. So that's interesting to see as this whole resurgence of interest in Kiss.
Well, Anthony Grant, you'll be back very soon. Stay
with more
us.
Gwyneth news, too.
Oh, I can't wait. And on to our next topic. Yesterday in India's remote northeastern states of Assam and Tripura, the first wave of the country's 814 million eligible voters will cast their ballots as the largest election in world history gets underway. To hear more about it, we are joined, as I said earlier, in studio by Channel 2's senior foreign affairs editor, Arad Nir. Good morning, Arad.
Good morning again.
We're going to take a look at the following report.
With high expectation for a change, India's general election kicks off Monday. The election will be in 9 phases, and the results will be published only after May 16. According to the polls, the INC party, which dominated the Indian government for 56 years since India became an independent country, is about to lose its power to the new rising star of Indian politics, former Gujarat governor, the controversial leader Narendra Modi.
You have given 60 years in Congress. Give me just 60 months. You have elected rulers, this time elect a servant. Brothers and sisters, the way the wind is blowing says that a strong government is going to be formed in Delhi.
To call Modi a colorful candidate will be an understatement. The man who may well become India's next prime minister was banned from entering the US after he was accused of inciting the 2002 ethnic riots in Gujarat, where at least 1,000 Muslims lost their lives in clashes with the Hindu majority. Nevertheless, Modi managed to gain popularity among young people who are tired of the corruption, the bad income inequality, and the violence in the country. The INC party, controlled by Rahul Gandhi, a last member of the glorious Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, which ruled the country for decades, is now expecting a defeat in the polls.
In 2004 Lok Sabha elections, opposition came up with the slogan, India Shining, and threw its weight on marketing by creating a balloon. On the day of voting, farmers, laborers and women pressed the button. The result was that the India Shining balloon burst.
More than 800 million people have the franchise. India's parliament consists of 2 houses, and the voting system is state-based, like in the US. Now, Indians, seen by many as patient, will have to wait until May 16 to see if their country is undergoing a real change.
So, Arad, besides the historic element of these elections, the size and scope of such grand elections, this is also a very democratic value of a battle of ideas. 2 very separate candidates battling separate ideologies.
Yeah, firstly, I must stress the importance of this process and how fascinating it is. It's the largest democracy on earth, which experiences the largest election process, which will take the longest time.
Right.
And try to imagine 850 million eligible voters will go to the polls. And as you said, the country is polarized. And the country is polarized mainly because half of the eligible voters will be, or should I say, half of the population in India nowadays is under the age of 24. It's a very, very young generation.
So all new voters as well.
Most of the new voters, fifth of the vote, which is fifth of 850 million.
A quite hefty sum of people.
Will vote for the first time. No one knows yet what the voting habits are. And it is fascinating, mainly since India is going out of the traditional culture into an age of uncertainty, I would say. Uncertainty because of unemployment, because of corruption, because of violence in the streets, and there are many questions to be answered by the Indian voters.
And it's very interesting, besides the issues that have to be tackled, the two candidates represent such different times of India and such different sectors of India. Of course, we have Gandhi, who is this huge dynasty and a very friend of the West. And then we have on the other side Modi, a Hindu nationalist, something that we haven't heard in India for a while.
And Gandhi is young, he's 43, and Modi is 63, also a totally different generation. And funny enough, according to the polls, Modi will get more votes. None of them will have a majority. This is why we are to expect this democratic trade horse scenes. We call it coalition talks here in Israel, which will be the same. Well, how do you conduct a poll in a pre-election poll amongst 850 million eligible voters? I mean, how accurate can you be? I mean, you can be extremely accurate, but you have to invest lots of money. And India, mind you, in India, it doesn't happen. So according to recent polls, it seems that at the end of the day, it will be a coalition government. It seems that Modi will get more votes, the Hindu nationalist will get more votes because he promises more restraint in the streets. One of the interesting features that we are following recently in India is the liberation of women. But as much as we get women liberation in India, we get much more anti-women violence in India.
Right.
So there are there are lots of tensions in India. He promised law and order, Modi. Gandhi promised other things, more prosperity, fight corruption, etc. So at the end of the day, now, if we look at the current picture, Modi gets more votes, Gandhi less, but both of them will have to form coalition government, and we'll see, it's not definite yet, who is the one to manage it.
But if it is Modi in the end of the day, as the polls are mentioning, his controversial past and maybe his controversial ideologies of today will put India in a completely different place in the international sphere if we look at it geopolitically and we look at it diplomatically.
No doubt. This will be the first day, the first week, the first month, but let's hope that things change, and we've seen leaders change as they get to the position. We know in Israel that things that you see from here, you don't see from there. It's getting very different. And I would suggest that we'll have to wait and see, because India is a very important trade partner for all Western countries. This is why everybody will do its utmost to make
ensure that the elections
go on and to see how they continue use India to the benefit of all sides.
Elad Neal, thank you for joining us, the Senior Foreign Affairs Editor of Channel 2.
Thank you for having me.
And after the break, legendary actor Mickey Rooney dies at the age of 93. We're going to take a closer look at his life and legacy. But first, some more of this morning's headlines. Welcome back. It's still Tuesday, April 8th, 2014. This is still the morning edition, and I, of course, am still Yael Wisner-Levy. Thank you for staying with us. Actor Mickey Rooney, one of Hollywood's brightest stars in the 1930s and 1940s, died in the beginning of the week in California. He was 93 years old. We're joined by the Jewish News 1 correspondent, Ron Jacobson. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, Yael.
Thank you for joining us.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. So Mickey Rooney, a legend since he was almost 6 years old. It was his first role in
Well, to be precise, he was 17 months old when he was first on stage, because he had a dad comedian and a mom dancer, and they had a little vaudeville show in Brooklyn where he was born as Joe Yule Jr., by the way.
Okay.
Not a lot of people knew.
No,
the whole Mickey Rooney thing was the sexy stage name. We all know about those stage names.
Yeah. But it's stuck. It's stuck into from his whole life, and his family now is all Rooney.
Yes, and he's done over 200 movies in his life, which is really impressive. But his big career days were during the 30s and 40s, the Hardy days. When he had 15
definitely.
movies as this wholesome young American guy, and of course we cannot forget those years with Judy Garland. All those
Indeed.
musicals. But what was interesting, he had also his ups and downs in careers. He had his peaks and valleys, so to say.
Well, when your career spans so long, it's only inevitable that you will.
Yeah.
But also had ups and downs in his personal life as well.
Yes.
Married 8 times.
8 times.
Never to Judy Garland.
No. Eva Gardner, though, was wife number 1. He had also 8 children and 1 adoptive child. So, so a very, very colorful kind of guy. He's 5'3", less than 160, 157. That's impressive that so many women got into that tiny kind of guy. But I guess he was full of charisma. People love that.
What's so amazing about people like Mickey Rooney, and correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't many actors today that are so multi-talented. He could act, sing, dance. He played the piano. How many actors
He was a
today?
painter, a writer.
I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. And he did everything, and he made money from everything. I mean,
Yes.
It wasn't like he just decided to concentrate in one field. There aren't many actors like that today.
No, and talking about the valleys in his life, in the early 60s, after earning so much money from his career, he lost it all and filed for bankruptcy. So everything that he had...
Due to what?
To spending,
Spending, okay, there you go. Spending.
Overspending, when you're young, you just think that money will flow in forever,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. So all this money that he had towards the end of his life, he did in the reboot, so to say, of Mickey Rooney. In his last years, he ran around the country with his wife and had a kind of review show where he talked about all of his career, some kind of like a stand-up kind of thing that he did. And people flocked to see it. It was amazing. But what is also interesting, the last kind of headline that Mickey Rooney did was in 2005 when Fox banned a commercial that he did where he showed his naked butt. And they said he was inappropriate.
In 2005, so he was in his 80s.
Yes.
Nice.
They said it is inappropriate for a man his age to show it. It was, and of all things, it was a commercial for cough medicine. So I don't know.
Really?
Yes.
That's a good way to. That's a good advertising ploy,
Maybe.
Show your behind.
Show your hiney for cough medicine.
Well, I guess he needed the money after.
Yes.
Is there anyone that you can think of that can compare to Mickey Rooney in terms of the scope of his work? I mean, is there anyone that Mickey Rooney emulates, or a new Mickey Rooney in the making today?
You know what? There isn't actually. We're losing, day by day, all the giants of the beginning of Hollywood, so to say, and the new generation doesn't really compare to what we had then. The scope of the stardom, the bigger than life kind of thing. Today it's all with TMZ and the internet and everything. Everything is degraded to the trash, so to say. It's you don't look up to those people anymore. You look down at them most of the time, and that's something that we will miss very dearly.
What are the eulogies that you're hearing from Hollywood? How are people remembering Mickey Rooney?
Well, in 2014 fashion, everybody has their eulogy on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, we hear very warm words, of course, people who were inspired by him, who, talk about how he represented America and Americans, and, very warm words. And it's also nice to see all the people that do this, people that you would not expect to come out and talk on behalf of Mickey Rooney.
Yeah. He was also involved in some politics in recent years, besides the movie, and besides, of course, now that I know he was in a commercial for cough medicine. New things that you learn.
Semi-exposed.
He testified before a Senate committee about the abuse of senior citizens. A 93-year-old star. He was a 93-year-old star. Many people, of course, don't get to that lovely old age. And
some of his kids already passed away before he did, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah. Any favorite movie, Anthony? Mickey Rooney movie?
What's the one with the
Stallion?
Babe in the Woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Babe in the
Well,
Woods.
the most famous one was the Black Stallion, of course, but.
What about National Velvet?
There you go.
Elizabeth Taylor.
There you go.
Yeah.
Was he ever married to Elizabeth Taylor? No.
No, but that was.
But she also was married 8 times.
Yeah, there you go. That,
800 times.
800.
Or something like that. But he was a legendary guy. You know, I have to say, you know, he also, my father once did surgery on his eye.
Really?
Yes, he had, it was a cataract, I believe,
wow,
removed.
In California?
Yeah, he lived in a suburb of LA called Westlake Village, which is actually a lot of, Heather Locklear once lived there as well.
How do you compare the two?
Heather Locklear.
Heather Locklear,
did they ever
Mickey
pair
Rooney.
up? You know, Judy and Mickey and Heather.
I think that Jay Leno lives there too. So.
No, I like that she's on the list, the same list with Mickey Rooney and Heather Locklear. Okay, yeah.
I'm thinking of 90210. Wait, no,
Melrose Place.
Wow. Yeah, where's the coffee?
Yeah. Okay, we went from the Black Stallion to Melrose Place. This discussion is going.
It can happen in Hollywood, right? I mean, unlikeliest of pairings.
Did your father operate also on Heather Locklear? If we're already in that kind of.
Frank Sinatra.
Really?
Yes, old Blue Eye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you, as a child, realize the significance?
I did. In the household at the time, it was the tension in the air was palpable as those surgeries loomed. Yes.
Look at that.
Yeah. Well, you know, even Hollywood legends need corrective eye surgery at some point.
There you go. Ron Jacobson, thank you for joining us this morning. Sorry that the conversation kind of maneuvered itself to Heather Locklear, but thank you for joining us.
We like Heather Locklear too.
We love Heather. Yeah.
And Anthony Grant, you are, of course, here. You're here with what's hot on the web. So, I mean, we lighten the mood with Heather Locklear. Take us into your first story.
Take you into an Israeli firm based in Tel Aviv called Store.Limited, which is claiming that it's going to be able to reboot your smartphone in 30 seconds.
No way.
Yeah,
the video has been all over. I've posted it on my Facebook too. It was on. It's amazing.
It's crazy. Now it's not on the market yet, but by 2016 it's going to be in which is maybe sooner.
Yeah.
And apparently they're working with the Samsung's Galaxy for the prototype, but imagine 30 seconds and then boom.
Imagine. I mean, I'm getting so excited. It's that you can recharge your phone in 30 seconds. Can I tell you that when I start seeing that I have 20%, my pulse.
You start to panic.
My pulse starts going up. I start getting a little bit sweaty.
Recharge.
I try, and it's crazy.
Yeah. But you know what's even crazier? How about charging up your phone on your kitchen counter? Because to be outdone, an American company and a big one, DuPont, is actually test marketing a countertop which
charging with less risk
which
of
you
tripping.
Basically just put your phone down on your kitchen counter and watch it charge up fast. It's called a PowerMet wirelessly. Yeah, and they're hoping
it's for
to
the
actually
klutzes, among us. Don't trip over their phone.
And the Martha Stewarts. They're just, elegant, recharging, no wires involved. That could be on the market as soon as this year. So that's before the Israelis hit the market with their
I see a
device.
little patriotism seeping in. I have to say that it's much cooler. The 30-second recharge is a bit more cool than
I think the kitchen countertop is pretty cool.
But then you have to be at your kitchen counter.
I'd rather be at my kitchen countertop, making some French toast with...
You make French toast. Do you even have a kitchen at home?
No.
There you go. Can't work for you.
Not
Stay
really.
in Tel Aviv.
It's a partial kitchen.
Wait till 2016. Life will be better.
Oh
what
my
else?
goodness. Let's hope so. In the meantime, let's go into the Paltrow.
Oh, good.
Now,
this is a topic I've been waiting for.
Now, we know that recently that she had a conscious uncoupling
she did.
from her husband.
Yeah,
what's his
Chris
name?
Martin.
Chris Martin.
What do you mean, what's his name?
Yeah, well,
he's the same part of that relationship.
Compared to Gwyneth Paltrow, it's what's his name. Anyways, they have invoked.
No,
listen to this. Listen. They have
Mm-hmm.
invoked the Kabbalah to take their breakup to a new level. They were in the Bahamas, and they hired a rabbi to read from the Zohar as they, under a breakup moon, cast pebbles into the sea to represent their wandering spirits as they go off in new directions.
Oh my! How does he even stand this stuff? I mean, you read her blog and you realize that
on
she's
Goop.com.
Yeah, Goop.com. You realize that she's either gone off the deep end or she's about to. And Chris Martin is mainstream. Head a band player, of course, for Coldplay.
Yeah.
It doesn't make this guy doesn't seem like the kind of guy that wants to go to the Bahamas and throw pebbles in the stones to represent.
Pebbles were thrown. They did. It was a ritual, conscious uncoupling beachside. But I don't know. It seems like they should just say, "Hey, we broke up." But in Hollywood, I guess you just have to give it a spin, right? Otherwise, it's just
get more readers for your Goop.com.
Yeah.
Where all the recipes do not have carbs.
I buy all my socks on Goop.com.
Are you serious?
Of course not.
Oh, okay. It's like organic with like
organic
vegan
breakups.
socks, vegan cotton, vegan this.
Well, good for that. Good for the environment. But yeah, I think the media is getting a little bit
You're being
tired
too politically
of.
correct. But we'll make our Gwyneth fight
We'll
more
take it to the
public
next
outside.
level
Yeah,
maybe
we'll take it outside.
Did you hear about Philadelphia?
What about it?
They were playing Tetris on the side of a skyscraper because it was Philly Tech Week. And
Fun.
yeah, the world's biggest game of Tetris
I love
on a
Tetris.
29-story building. Probably the most exciting thing to happen in Philadelphia since the Liberty Bell cracked.
Wow.
That's my guess.
But Tetris is the best game. It really,
it's just sort of...
Everything has changed. Tetris is still the best game, especially when you get the shape that's like the upside down L, and you have no idea what to do with it, and it always makes a hole. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
I do. I played Tetris, not on a skyscraper.
You just dated yourself, by the way, yeah. I just want to tell you that.
Yeah.
Because most kids today don't know what Tetris is.
Really?
I'll date you next if you
I
let
love
me.
Tetris. Tetris and Pac-Man, come on. So that's,
Pac-Man's the best. Yeah, the original table side one where you could actually sit
There
in
you
it.
go.
Oh, fantastic stuff.
Nice.
Speaking
I'm
of-
happy for Philly.
Yeah, speaking of old-fashioned times, Los Angeles Times is all over the fact that David Letterman is going to be quite soon, perhaps next year, leaving his show behind.
2015, yeah.
And this is causing a stir. Who's going to take his place? The format that he kind of created in that niche. It's
This is
anybody's
an end of
guess.
an era. Yeah.
It is the end of an era, and who knows who's going to fill in for him? Nobody knows right now.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
everyone else has a show. The question is who's going to fill in that hour? I see here
everything.
Conan and Jimmy Fallon and Jon
they have,
Stewart. They have their own shows.
They're comfortable in their own shows at the moment.
The
Steve
question is
Colbert,
if someone new will enter it, because one of the people who are now losing their show and is rumored to maybe take over is Chelsea Handler, who's leaving her show on Entertainment. Maybe for CBS to take a woman into that slot of
A
the
woman,
late-
and she's pretty controversial.
Yeah.
She's not
Yeah.
as, David Letterman is more traditional in his jokes.
Yeah, I mean,
His
of
humor.
course, he was at the time, when he started off very cutting edge with this sort of ironic posturing and making a parody of a talk show almost in the mainstream talk show slot.
Right.
So interesting to see how, and the Hollywood papers, of course, are following it very closely.
Is he retiring? Did he give a reason, or is the network kind of saying we're sick of you?
I don't think it's that. I think he's been doing this for so long, and he's maybe wants to spend more time with his family. There's things like that coming out, or maybe he has a new venture planned. Who knows? Like Larry King.
What is Larry King?
Larry King's on Russia Today.
I knew about that. I forgot about that.
Creepy, right? But
that's because I think he got the boot from CNN. It wasn't really.
I don't know. Did he?
To go from CNN to Russia Today when you're Larry King.
Well, this is the time of Putin, so who knows? Yeah. Can I have koalas?
Yeah.
Did you see the koala selfie?
No. Does it shave off 15 pounds?
No, I think it adds 16. That was making some headlines in Sydney. They put these, a little plug for Sony.
I love this.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
This is amazing.
I know, they're so cute.
Wow. I can only imagine, let's put it in all these cells of animals and see what happens.
Yeah,
wow.
The koalas are, they're usually kind of shy, but I guess not about taking pictures of themselves. But great stuff from down under, and also causing some headlines. Smart, cuddly. They've seen the Maoris. The New Zealand warriors that were tearing up the British headlines with their cheekiness. Kate Middleton was at a ceremony.
Yeah, she's arrived.
She's arrived, and there you've got a picture of her on the right.
Who's that, Georgie?
That's little baby Georgie.
Yay.
This is a cultural
image
interchange.
Of his father. Spitting image, no?
He's got more hair.
He has more hair.
He's a cutie. And there's rumors that a second could be on the way, but those rumors are just rumors.
Really?
Just
I didn't hear
rumors,
those rumors, but you know best, of course.
Well, I like to chart my British royalty and their trajectories.
Wow, that would be
we'll
pretty
see.
fast if there's another one.
Maybe not right away, but maybe they'll be inspired by New Zealand and all the cultural resources to get a little primeval on their own. Who knows?
Were they taken aback by this welcome?
They were a little bit taken aback, but Kate was very gracious. She kept eye contact on the eyes of the Maori and not on the undressed areas.
Maybe we should do a tribute and call it the Mickey Rooney moment.
Oh yeah, I would rather see the Maori than the Mickey Rooney.
There is no gracious like Kate Middleton. Anthony Graham, thank you for joining us. After the break, Darth Vader is now running for president in Ukraine. Well, sort of. We'll discuss. But first, let's hear some more of this morning's headlines. Yes, yes. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. We're now joined by the Economy Magazine correspondent Daniel Roth. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning.
What do you have for us today?
So it's 20 years since the Rwandan genocide began. 800,000 people were murdered over the course of about 3 months. And actually in the, in the last 20 years or so, Rwanda's actually been doing quite well economically. They've been growing and kind of coming back from this darkness.
Many of it, of course, is due to foreign aid and foreign almost guilt, I would say, after they didn't prevent the genocide. Let's take a look at the report from the Economy Magazine.
Names are carved in stone to remember the more than 800,000 people murdered over 3 months in the Rwandan genocide that began in April 1994. But just 20 years later, the country has made a remarkable turnaround. Its economic growth, averaging 8% annually over the last 4 years, is among the strongest in Africa.
In 1984, Rwanda's per capita GDP was $130. This is very, very low. And now, in 2012, the per capita GDP increased to $620, almost 5 times as big as 20 years ago.
At a time when economic inequality has been increasing around the world, Rwanda's poverty rate has fallen from 59% to 45% between 2001 and 2011.
Rwanda is one of the best performing developing countries in the world. It's not only about the growth rate, but also in terms of poverty reduction and reducing inequality. Some people call it's a development hat trick in football.
Public works projects have been vital to Rwanda's economic resurgence. The service sector is booming with investment, rising from $800 million in 2012 to $1.4 billion in 2013. This is in part because of the young population. 70% of the country is under 25. Meanwhile, outside of the urban areas, 90% of the 12 million person population works in agriculture, exporting products including minerals, coffee, and tea.
It is the #1 export, and it will continue to be so because there is a lot of expansion going on in Rwanda. There are so many new factories coming up, and in certain districts there is more land being cultivated.
There are challenges. Though the country is ranked highly for ease of doing business, private investment has been minor. As well, foreign aid represents about 40% of the national budget. This reality created an economic shockwave when the country's aid was slashed in 2012 in the midst of reports that Rwanda was supporting a rebellion in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's still plenty of room for Rwanda's economic growth, but what has happened thus far in the 20 years since the genocide is indeed remarkable.
So indeed remarkable, the growth that's come from the economic prosperity, but a lot of it has to do with foreign aid, and I didn't just put that out as a trigger. It's true. I mean, many countries kind of turned their backs during the genocide, but right when it finished, everyone seemed to want to take a helping hand.
Yeah, and actually one of the predominant themes in the media these last few days has been survivors of the Rwandan genocide kind of openly and outwardly calling out the UN, calling out the US for really not stepping in, not really leaving. And I once met Romeo Dallaire, who was the head of the UN mission there at the time, who's very pained and at this point a broken man in a lot of ways when you bring this subject up. And this is a guy who felt really abandoned by the international community as he watched Rwanda kind of devolve into genocide.
And it was the first of its, the African, I would say, genocides, or not, I mean, you can't really compare genocide to genocide, but it was the first kind of international crisis where the world didn't really know what to do. And since then we've had, of course, Darfur and so forth, which has gotten much more PR, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the remarkable part of this story is that Rwanda, with about 40% of their budget is made up of foreign aid, has made a huge turnaround, growing 8% annually, seeing GDP grow by 5 times, seeing tourism grow by 6 times.
Wow. So it's more tourism that has boosted the economy, or what else?
In part, it's tourism. Their number, by far, 90% of the people in Rwanda live in rural places, not in urban places, doing agricultural work with coffee, tea, and mining predominantly. So that's really the center of their economy, but they just opened the first Kigali Stock Exchange. They're looking forward, and one of the unique things about Rwanda is, on one hand, you hear a lot about political repression and lack of freedom of expression and freedom of the press and things like this. On the other hand, that same government's putting an enormous amount of money into public works projects, infrastructure. 10% of the yearly budget, of the annual budget, goes into public works infrastructure building, which obviously creates work for people, creates infrastructure for the country to move.
And stability, something that, of course, it's needing and looking towards for 20 years. They're still also looking for justice, so for the genocide, still looking for many answers, as you said. That obviously, with the economic situation a bit better, now they can turn maybe to justice as well.
Absolutely. So the economic situation is better. It's not perfect. In the late 90s, it was around 60% the poverty rate, and over the course of 10 or so years, it went down to 45%. A good move forward, but not great. It still leaves 45% of people living in poverty. But yeah, on the books, there's a law, for example, that ends the differentiation between Hutus and Tutsis, and that's on the books. However, most people who go and visit and most people who live in Rwanda tend to say that's not actually true in reality. Similar sort of story, the end of apartheid in South Africa didn't mean the end of economic injustice in South Africa. And you see huge discrepancies in both class and race in South Africa. Even though the laws have changed, culture has not caught up.
So foreign aid is now 40% of the economy. How much longer will foreign countries need to be investing in Rwanda to kind of let it on its own, or is this something that needs to go on for quite a while?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, foreign aid is historically speaking not something that a country says, oh, please, no, it's okay. We're good.
Here in Israel, we thrive on foreign aid.
Right. Israel receives $3 billion from the U.S. every year for in military aid, predominantly. But it's unlikely that they'll ask for it to end, and it's in the near future. It doesn't look like it's going to drop anytime soon. You're talking about 20 years since one of the biggest genocides, one of the most horrific, inhuman scenes in recent human history.
Right. Politically, has Rwanda ever tried to, since its own genocide in its own country, try to intervene or at least put its ideology on other countries around it, supporting certain rebellions or not?
So Paul Kagame, who's been the president and is this guy who's pointed to as both supporting public works projects and politically repressive, has been accused of putting money into Democratic Republic of Congo rebellions, which actually resulted in foreign aid being cut. And so it actually sent a shockwave through the economy there.
And it sends a message that foreign aid is needed more than ever, maybe, perhaps.
Right, or a plan to become independent. Right. One of the, depending on who you are, those are the two answers.
The chicken and the egg kind of idea. Daniel Roth, you're going to stay with us, The Economy Magazine, every day at
7:10.
There you go. Stay with us next, because we're joined now by the I-24 News tech correspondent, Shai Ringel. Good morning, Shai.
Good morning.
What are we starting with?
We're starting with Mozilla.
Yeah, the tech giant.
Yeah, Mozilla is not exactly a tech giant. Mozilla Foundation is a non-profit organization. Every time you use a Firefox, it's actually from a non-profit organization that contributes to internet openness. Now, Mozilla needed to appoint a new CEO. And they chose one of the co-founders, which is a really interesting guy named Brendan Eich. Mm-hmm. Brendan Eich was a really interesting man when it came to JavaScript.
He invented JavaScript, right?
He kind of invented JavaScript. It's a
Poor
long
guy.
story.
Kind
Yeah.
of like how Al Gore kind of invented the internet, or like actually.
No. He was one of the most important people when it came to inventing the JavaScript. He wasn't the sole man who invented this thing, but he's a really interesting dude. And the one thing that made him even more interesting is that he contributed in 2008 to Proposition 8 in California.
Mixing text and politics in a second. Huh?
Yeah, and
which you don't see that much in Silicon Valley. Not many people try to get there.
It depends. Not when it comes to gay rights. Uh-huh. We have to remember that Silicon Valley exists near San Francisco. It's a very open and liberal place. There are companies that are not that liberal, like Microsoft. Microsoft, they sit in Seattle. They are much more conservative. Bill Gates usually donates to conservative organizations. But when it comes to Silicon Valley and when it comes to non-profit organizations in Silicon Valley, it's a huge deal.
Yeah.
The half of the board of Mozilla decided they are quitting, and Brandon had to manage the backfire that Mozilla, which was this really cute organization that everybody loved because it always talked about internet freedom and the fact that the big tech companies are controlling the web.
So it's a huge contradiction because Proposition 8, just for our viewers who may have forgotten, sought to ban same-sex marriages in California.
Yeah, and it was
super liberal place to begin with.
It was ruled against by the Supreme Court in California in 2010. Sorry.
Did he have anything to say for himself to defend his decision to contribute to?
He did one interview to CNET, and he talked about the fact that we have to put aside his political views, and he's going to be a good CEO. Which he was going to be a good CEO because he's a really good at managing companies, and he's one of the co-founders of Mozilla. He knows the organization really well, but it didn't work. He had to step down. Mozilla had to put a press release about the fact that people are expecting better than us, and we decided we should do the right thing.
So other tech companies are now probably a bit celebrating the bad PR that Mozilla got.
Maybe, but it is it's a little bit a controversy in Silicon Valley because now people are saying, okay, he had really bad ideas, really bad political views, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a good CEO. And he had a good political view when it came to internet freedom, which is all what Mozilla is about.
Right.
So it's still
not trying to capitalize on information, on resources. And so
exactly. And giving the power to the people, because Mozilla is still the only free source, free code browser out there.
Which is still though contradictory to. I mean, if you're so liberal in capitalizing resources for people, what do you care about same-sex marriages? Why do you feel so strongly about it?
People are interesting. It's a fact, and you will not find the perfect CEO that has all the perfect ideas and political views. When it comes to Proposition 8 and banning same-sex marriage, it is kind of interesting to see how the guy who was supposed to be this liberal man who wanted internet freedom is looking at other people's inside their house.
Yeah, inside their bedroom.
Yeah, exactly.
So we shouldn't feel sorry for him, though. I mean, he'll find a new job pretty quickly. As you said, he's super talented. He's one of the...
He is super talented, and Mozilla is not a place to make money. He wanted to do it because he believed the cause. But, you know, he'll have to find a job now.
Yeah, you can move out of California, go to a Republican state, you know, there's tons of money there. Go work for a big oil company. They'll love his Proposition 8
Probably,
ideally. What else do you have?
We'll talk about Cuba.
Okay.
Because...
Speaking about liberalism, yeah.
Yeah, because it turns out that the Americans were operating a social media site for Cubans for the last 3 to 4 years.
Operating it for the Cuban people.
For the Cuban people, and they didn't tell anybody. It's a U.S. Organization called USAID.
Right, a government organization.
Yeah, it's a government organization. Even the White House, most of the people in the White House tell the press they didn't know this site was from the U.S. government. It shut down just because the government decided to stop the funding. But what was really interesting about it, it was a site that lets you anonymously speak about the Cuban government.
Oh, that's so nice of the Americans.
Yeah, because...
I mean, it is. I'm not saying it in such a... I started sarcastically, but it's what the Arab Revolution tried to do in 2011. Who knows who was really behind...
Yeah, that's what the Americans believe. The American believes in that all the Cuban people needs is a little push. So they decided, okay, we can see that the internet is helping a lot of countries to get that revolution,
to liberalize
itself. Let's do it ourselves.
Kind of backfired just a bit. Shai Ringel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Daniel Roth, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to watch us tomorrow. We're finished for today. You can visit us on the web, i24news.tv, or on our Facebook page and Twitter. We'll be here tomorrow, of course, to help you start your day every day. I was Yael Listener-Levy. We'll see you soon.